Today, we are going to dive deep into one of the most important and honestly most paradoxical moments in India's entire freedom struggle, the non-cooperation movement. It's an incredible story about a nation's united promise for freedom and how it all ended in a shocking, violent turn. So let's get into it. So here's the central question, the real puzzle we're trying to solve today. You have this massive movement, a movement defined by its peaceful principles, led by Mahatma Gandhi himself, and yet it ends with a police station engulfed in flames. How does a philosophy of absolute nonviolence lead to such a fiery, violent end?
And this is the event at the very heart of our story. We're talking about a place called Chauri Chaura in February of 1922. It was a moment so violent, so contrary to the movement's ideals, that it would force Gandhi to stop everything right in its tracks. To really get why, we've got to go back to the beginning.
Right, so this whole movement didn't just pop up out of thin air. It was born from a really powerful and frankly revolutionary idea. What if an entire nation, millions of people, simply refused to cooperate with its rulers? What if they just said no? You know, the years leading up to 1920 were kind of a perfect storm. First, you get the Rowlatt Act, this incredibly repressive law that basically allowed the British to arrest people without trial. It was a huge slap in the face. Then, the horrific Jallianwala Bagh massacre, where British troops gunned down hundreds of unarmed Indians. It sent shockwaves across the country. And on top of all that, you have the Khilafat movement, which powerfully united Hindus and Muslims against the British. The stage was absolutely set for a massive, nationwide uprising. So, what was the weapon for this uprising? It wasn't a sword or a gun. It was an idea, Satyagraha. At its core, it's the philosophy of nonviolent resistance. Now, this isn't about being passive. It's about actively, but peacefully, disobeying laws you believe are unjust. This idea was the very soul of the movement. And this quote from Gandhi just illustrates the brilliantly simple logic behind it all. I mean, think about it. The British Empire in India, with just a few thousand officials, couldn't possibly rule over hundreds of millions of people without their consent, without their cooperation. So Gandhi's thinking was, if you just withdraw that cooperation, the whole structure, the whole empire would just collapse. Okay, so that's the grand idea. But what did it actually look like on the ground? How did this idea translate into action and awaken an entire nation? Well, non-cooperation was a comprehensive program, a total system-wide rejection. We're talking students walking out of government schools, famous lawyers like Motilal Nehru just giving up their lucrative practices. People refused to vote in elections. And maybe most famously, they boycotted foreign goods, making these huge bonfires of imported cloth. It was a profound statement. And here's what's so clever. It was really two sides of the same coin. It wasn't just about saying no to the British. It was also about saying yes to India. So as people were boycotting British institutions, they were actively building their own parallel, self-reliant ones. National schools popped up. Local village courts were formed, and there was this huge push for Indian-made goods, especially hand-spun khadi cloth. And let me be clear, this wasn't some elite movement confined to the cities. No way. This was a true mass awakening. It swept across the entire country, pulling in people from every single walk of life. Peasants in the fields, workers in the factories, students, and women who came out in enormous numbers. They all became part of this incredible national current. The British government? Well, they were totally stumped. So for nearly 2 years, this massive nationwide movement held true, for the most part, to its nonviolent principles. But that all changed in one small town. And that brings us right back to that blaze of fire we talked about. The spark, as it so often is, was something very real and very relatable. People were protesting economic hardship, specifically the high price of food. They were marching peacefully, but the local police, well, they responded with force. They opened fire on the crowd. 22. That was the tragic result of what happened next. 22 policemen lost their lives in the chaos that followed. It's a number that would literally change the course of India's history. So that police firing, it turned the crowd from peaceful protesters into an enraged mob. In retaliation, they chased the policemen, who retreated into their own station. The mob then set it on fire. It was a brutal, horrific act of violence that just shattered the core principle of Satyagraha. So news of this incident reaches Gandhi. And his reaction, what he did next, well, it became one of the most controversial and fiercely debated decisions in the entire history of the freedom struggle. This quote, it tells you everything you need to know about his thinking. For Gandhi, the principle of nonviolence was absolute. It was completely non-negotiable. He truly believed that the very moment the movement turned to violence, it had lost its moral high ground. It had lost its soul.
So because of this one incident, in this one town, he called a halt to the entire national movement. Just like that. A movement that had mobilized millions, a movement that had shaken the British Empire to its very core, was stopped dead in its tracks. And you can probably guess the reaction from his own colleagues. It was shock, disbelief. Leaders like Subhash Chandra Bose and Jawaharlal Nehru, who were actually in jail at the time, were just devastated. They felt it was a huge mistake to punish the entire country for the actions of one angry mob.
So, does that mean the movement was a failure? I mean, it didn't achieve its stated goal of Swaraj or self-rule within a year, but its real impact, its legacy, is so much more complex than that. If we look at it like a balance sheet, you can see the story pretty clearly. Yeah, on paper, its direct goals, Swaraj in a year, not achieved. But its lasting impact, absolutely monumental. It awakened the political consciousness of millions of ordinary people. It cemented Gandhi's role as a true leader of the masses. And it proved beyond a doubt that a united, nonviolent movement could seriously challenge the mighty British Empire.
And this, right here, is probably the most crucial takeaway of all. The greatest success of the non-cooperation movement wasn't really political, it was psychological. For the very first time, huge numbers of ordinary Indians stood up together and shed their fear of the colonial state. They'd found a new self-confidence, a new backbone, and a powerful new weapon in their fight for freedom.
Which leaves us with the final, nagging question. Was Gandhi's decision a masterstroke of principle that saved the movement from descending into total chaos? Or was it a tragic miscalculation that threw away the best chance for freedom India had seen up to that point? It is a fascinating debate, and one that honestly continues to this very day.